I can still feel it, the bite of cold metal against my palms, the heavy scent of ozone in the air, and the gray sky of an Earth that wasn't my own. I didn't read about it in a book, and I didn't watch it on a screen. I lived it. A parallel world where War of the Worlds wasn't fiction but bloody history. Colossal monuments, wary eyes on every street, and hovering machines scanning the skies. It was like stepping into a nightmare made real. Tonight I'm going to tell you everything I saw, and why it might be a warning for all of us. Welcome to Chilling Secrets, where real encounters and hidden worlds collide. I'm here to share not just stories, but experiences I've actually lived, the kind that leave your heart racing and your mind questioning reality itself. If you're fascinated by parallel dimensions, cosmic mysteries, and true tales that sound impossible, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and join me as we dive deeper into the unknown together. I still remember the first time I stepped across the shimmering threshold of the dimensional gate, its heat mirage shimmer hiding a reality I couldn't have imagined. I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was a traveler carrying the weight of two worlds on my shoulders. My name is Grant Tilden, and for 7 years I had trained to walk through doors no one else even believed existed. Echo Horizon, the government's shadow program, had sent me to explore Earth 217, a world almost indistinguishable from our own. 98.7%, the data said, but those remaining percentages hid an abyss. As the electric pressure washed over my skin and the platform dissolved beneath my feet, I had no idea just how deep that abyss would run. When my boots hit cracked pavement on the other side, the air felt thicker, like a storm had just passed. I inhaled cautiously and opened my eyes to gray skies stretching over an abandoned industrial district. Everything looked familiar at first glance: brick warehouses, rusted rail tracks, the faint echo of seagulls in the distance. But there was an underlying tension that pressed against my nerves, a silence too complete, like a breath held too long. In my pocket sat the transponder, my lifeline home, heavy and reassuring. It was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance. 3 days of observation, no interference, no risks. But as soon as I started walking, I knew nothing about this mission would be routine. I moved toward what my map told me was Boston, scanning for signs of life. The city rose up along the coastline much as it does in my world, but jagged towers of stone and metal interrupted the skyline, casting alien shadows over streets I once thought I knew. They were not skyscrapers, stadiums, or monuments in any familiar sense. They were tributes to something vast and unknowable, towering human figures carved in strange poses, holding back mechanical limbs, tentacles, or devices whose shapes resisted logic. Moss clung to their bases and plaques bore inscriptions with dates that didn't make sense, references to wars and invasions that had never happened where I came from. As I walked among these giant relics, I saw radiation checkpoints at major intersections and small kiosks where citizens scanned wristbands before moving on. Air quality monitors blinked on lampposts. People walked quickly with their eyes flicking skyward every few steps, as if expecting something to swoop down at any moment. Their clothes were ordinary, their language was English, but their posture was different, watchful, prepared, almost brittle. I blended in as best I could, wearing locally sourced clothing, but even then I felt their eyes sliding over me like scanners. Each block I passed through felt like walking into a photograph of my own world that had been subtly warped. School buildings patched with mismatched materials, banners urging vigilance, and public posters that made my stomach clench. One of them showed a three-legged machine towering over a cityscape, heat rays blazing from its head, with bold letters screaming, "Remember the invasion. Remember the heat rays. Stay vigilant." My blood went cold as recognition dawned. This was no public art. This was history. In my world, War of the Worlds was a novel, a century-old classic. Here, it was a collective nightmare burned into their national identity, a real invasion that had carved scars into their society. Everywhere I looked, I felt the weight of an unseen presence. The monuments weren't just memorials, they were warnings. The checkpoints weren't just bureaucratic. They were shields against something still out there. And the sky, always that pale, unsettled gray, seemed like a lid on a box about to burst. Walking through Boston on Earth 217 felt like trespassing in someone else's trauma. I realized then that I wasn't just a visitor. By crossing into this world, I had stepped into a living wound. Each street corner whispered of a battle fought and lost, each wary glance a silent plea not to bring new disaster. I had come to observe, but already the place was observing me back, measuring me, perhaps even judging. And deep inside, beneath the trained calm of a government scientist, a terrible question began to form. If War of the Worlds had really happened here, what would stop it from happening to my world next? I had been moving through the city for barely 2 days when my lifeline disappeared. The transponder, my one-way home, was simply gone, and with it went the thin thread connecting me to Echo Horizon. Panic had already begun to press against my ribs when the low whir of a hovering machine reached my ears. Through a dusty window I saw a metallic disc drifting down the street, its scanning beams sliding over the cracked pavement like a searchlight. My heart hammered in my chest. They shouldn't have been able to detect me. I hadn't interfered. I had followed Protocol Zero. Yet the beams shifted from red to blinding white, turned toward me, and in that instant I knew I'd been found. The wall exploded inward before I could even move. Brick and dust rained down, and 3 armored figures burst into the room. They moved with the practiced precision of hunters, their weapons raised and tracking me as if I were prey. "Don't move," the lead voice ordered, crisp and female. A helmet folded back to reveal a scarred face and eyes as sharp as broken glass. I slowly raised my hands, words tumbling out, that I wasn't their enemy, that I was only observing. But her gaze never softened. "By authority of the Earth Defense Force, you're being detained for questioning," she said, and the next thing I knew a flash of blue light swallowed me whole. When I woke, I was strapped to a metal chair in a white room so clean it felt like a laboratory. A single mirrored wall watched me like a silent observer. My mouth was dry, my wrists ached against the restraints, and across from me sat a man with a face carved from stone. Commander William Shaw introduced himself with the steady tone of someone who had spent a lifetime at war. His uniform bore medals I didn't recognize, his eyes deep wells of exhaustion. He asked me where I'd come from. He asked what I knew about the Martians. For a moment, everything tilted. Martians? Was he speaking in code? Then the pieces began to fit. The monuments. The posters. The fearful eyes. Here, War of the Worlds had never ended as fiction. It had begun as a massacre. I tried to explain my world to him, how H.G. Wells had written the story over a century ago, how it had become a classic novel, how movies and radio dramas had turned it into entertainment. Shaw's jaw tightened as he rolled up his sleeve and showed me an arm crisscrossed with burned scars. His parents had died in the Boston heat ray massacre when he was a child. Lieutenant Daniels, the scarred woman who had captured me, had lost her entire family in California's harvesting camps. Every name, every wound, every glance in that room was a living record of horrors I had only read about in fiction. They called them Keepers now, not Martians. And the Keepers had not left after the first invasion. They had adapted. The bacteria that destroyed them in Wells's novel had only thinned their ranks here. 20 years later a second wave came, armed with biological countermeasures. Humanity fought, but only barely survived. The world that Shaw showed me on the holographic map was a patchwork of colors. Red zones where the Keepers ruled openly, yellow zones of shared control, and fragile green zones like his underground colony where humans clung to freedom. It was not peace. It was subjugation. As Shaw spoke, a kind of vertigo swept over me. My Earth had no defenses against this technology. No memory of this kind of war. 8 billion unsuspecting people living their lives as if they were safe. But if the Keepers had detected my dimensional jump, then they knew there was another world, my world, ripe for conquest. The thought of their tripods and heat rays crossing over made me nauseous. I had not only stumbled into a nightmare, I had led it home. The questions continued, and my answers spilled out. I described dimensional translocation theory, how my transponder created a bridge between universes, how the energy signature could be detected if someone was looking. Shaw listened grimly, then concluded what I had been too afraid to say: the keepers wanted dimensional travel. They had already built their own research hub. My arrival had accelerated their plans. Soon they would not need me to open a doorway. They would build one themselves. In the underground tunnels, the Earth Defense Force led me past steel bulkheads into a cavernous space carved out of bedrock. This was Sanctuary Boston, a city hidden beneath the ruins above, glowing under panels of artificial sunlight. Children played in narrow courtyards, vendors sold food from improvised stalls, soldiers moved like shadows with weapons slung across their backs. I had never felt so foreign in my life. My clothes were too clean, my skin too pale. I was an intruder from a safer universe. General Reed, an older man with iron-gray hair, gathered his council in a stone-walled chamber. Lieutenant Daniels stood at his side, still watching me with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant hope. Dr. Morgan Mitchell, their chief scientist, leaned forward over my diagrams with eyes shining at the mention of dimensional energy. As I laid out the structure of my transponder and how it worked, I saw her trembling with both fear and possibility. "This is what they've been trying to build," she whispered. "You've already done it." They spoke openly then of their crisis. 3 days ago, unusual energy readings had appeared at the Keeper Hub in Boston, signals unlike anything seen before. After my arrival, the activity spiked tenfold. They had intercepted my lost transponder and contained its signal, but the damage might already be done. "They've locked onto your Earth's coordinates," Morgan said quietly. "They're building a gateway." The air in the room felt heavy, as though we were breathing the same unspoken thought. If the Keepers completed their gateway, they would pour through into my Earth like water through a burst dam. All the wars of history would look like skirmishes compared to what would come next. Shaw's voice cut through the silence. "We can't allow them to finish. We destroy the hub before they complete it." It was not said as a question. It was the only plan they had left. But to destroy the hub, they needed someone who understood dimensional energy. Me? They had explosives and soldiers, but they did not know which conduits to overload, which circuits to sever, how to reverse the flow of power. Only I could do that, and even then it would be a suicide mission. I remember looking into Morgan's face and seeing the quiet desperation there. She had been born underground. She had only seen the sky a handful of times, always under threat. She dreamed of open air, of sunlight unfiltered by steel. And now she was willing to risk her life for the chance to stop the Keepers from conquering another world. Shaw's eyes held something harder, a lifetime of war and loss, of command decisions made in dark rooms, of survivors buried under collapsed cities. They were both looking at me not as a scientist but as a lifeline. The decision coiled inside me like a spring. Protocol Zero had already been shattered. I had been captured, interrogated, and my technology had fallen into the hands of another world. The rule of observe only meant nothing if my own Earth was about to be invaded. I thought of my sister's laugh, the smell of coffee in my kitchen, the ease with which people on my Earth looked at the sky without fear. They had no idea what was coming. And here was a chance, perhaps the only chance, to prevent it. So I told them yes. Yes, I would help them infiltrate the hub. Yes, I would use my knowledge to collapse the gateway before it opened. But I also told them something else, that if we failed, my Earth would need to know how to fight back. I asked them for their data, their strategies, their weaknesses and strengths, anything I could bring back. Danielle's face softened just a little then, a flicker of respect or maybe resignation. That night, in the quarters they assigned me, I stared at the low ceiling and listened to the muted hum of ventilation fans. Somewhere above us, the Keepers were building their doorway. Somewhere back home, my colleagues at Echo Horizon were probably searching for my signal, unaware that a nightmare was assembling on the other side. I thought about the scars on Shaw's arm, the tremor in Morgan's voice, the cold efficiency of the drones. This wasn't just an alien occupation. It was a slow-motion extinction. I could feel the weight of both worlds pressing against me. One had already fallen and was clawing its way back. The other had no idea it was next. I promised myself, as I drifted into uneasy sleep, that I would do everything possible to stop the keepers, to sabotage their gateway, and to carry the warning home. Even if it meant I wouldn't return at all. The terrifying truth was no longer a story to me, it was a responsibility, and it had my name written all over it. I remember the silence before the mission, a silence so deep it felt like the underground city itself was holding its breath. We suited up in armor that smelled faintly of ozone and steel, every buckle and strap a reminder that this was no simulation, no exercise, but a one-way journey into the heart of the Keeper's power. I checked my transponder again, still too weak to take me home. This wasn't about returning anymore. It was about ending what I had helped set in motion. At dawn, we left Sanctuary Boston through a maze of tunnels carved like veins beneath the city, our boots scuffing against concrete scarred by decades of war. When we finally emerged onto the surface, Boston was a ghost of itself. Buildings rose like jagged teeth, streets were warped and broken, and the air smelled of rust and damp stone. Purple-black plants pulsed against the ruins, creeping up walls and curling across sidewalks, a living invasion of alien biology. We stayed low, hugging shadows and ducking under shattered overhangs. Drones glided overhead with crimson scanner beams that swept across the rubble like searchlights from another world. Each time we froze, my heart drummed in my throat. I tried to memorize the path home, but the city had become a labyrinth of trauma. The Keeper hub loomed ahead after what felt like hours, a massive dome of shimmering material surrounded by tripod sentinels. Up close, they were far worse than the old illustrations in Wells's book, their bodies bulging with cables, mechanical limbs bending in impossible ways, heat ray apertures glowing like eyes from hell. Descartes lobbed an EMP grenade into their formation, and for a few precious seconds the tripods spasmed and fell still, their sensors flickering dark. That was our window. We sprinted across open ground, the weight of our packs biting into our shoulders, and reached a concealed service hatch veiled in sickly alien flora. Burke hacked the lock and we tumbled inside just as the tripods began to stir again. Inside, the air thickened and sparked with static electricity. The walls pulsed faintly like living tissue, threaded with glowing veins of liquid metal. Small apertures opened as we passed, flashing scanning beams across our suits, closing again like eyes. The corridors were quiet but not empty. I felt a presence in the humming walls, a low-frequency pressure in my skull. Morgan whispered that it was a psychic countermeasure, designed to disorient human intruders. I clung to memories of my sister's laughter, the smell of coffee back home, anything to anchor myself as we descended deeper toward the central chamber. When we reached it, my breath caught. The space was cathedral-like, dominated by a pulsing blue energy field suspended between pylons, a gateway almost ready to bridge worlds. Around its base stood dozens of cylindrical tanks filled with cloudy fluid. Human forms floated inside, skin pale and eyes closed. "Hosts," Daniel spat. "They're preparing them for crossing." My stomach turned as I realized what that meant. The Keepers weren't just building a doorway. They were preparing an army of bodies to fill it. Then the first Keeper entered, tall and gaunt, its reflective helmet hiding what lay beneath. Descartes fired. The bullets ricocheted harmlessly, and the creature replied with a beam of searing light that sent him sprawling. Chaos erupted. More Keepers poured in, moving with inhuman precision. Shaw shouted at Morgan and me to keep working. My fingers flew over alien controls, reversing power conduits, overloading frequencies, trying to collapse the gateway before it opened. Morgan's voice rose in a tremor of urgency as she translated the alien interfaces. "They've locked onto your Earth's coordinates," she cried. "We're almost out of time." That was when I saw it. A fallen Keeper's helmet cracked open to reveal not flesh but a nest of writhing metallic tendrils, pulsing like living wires. Every time a droplet of water from a leaking conduit touched them, they recoiled sharply, sparking and hissing as if burned. A passage from Wells flashed through my mind, about bacteria and the Martians' lack of immunity. Here it wasn't bacteria. It was water itself, Earth's simplest, most abundant compound, short-circuiting their electromagnetic structure. I shouted the discovery to Shaw and Daniels, and Morgan's eyes went wide. She sprinted to a nearby fire suppression unit, yanking it free from the wall. "This uses water," she yelled, unleashing a spray across the advancing keepers. The effect was instant. Their armor spasmed, tendrils shriveled, and their coordinated movements faltered. Shaw and Daniels grabbed more units, creating a curtain of water between us and the aliens, and for the first time we saw them hesitate, even retreat. I turned back to the console, heart pounding, and initiated the final sequence. The gateway shuddered, its blue glow flickering to angry red as the feedback loop built to critical mass. Sparks danced up the pylons, and the tanks containing the hosts cracked under the strain. 2 minutes until collapse! I shouted. We had to run. Shaw hoisted the wounded Descartes over his shoulder. Morgan grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the exit as Daniels laid down bursts of gunfire and jets of water to cover our retreat. We fled through the corridors, now alive with alarms and flashing lights, the alien architecture trembling around us. Outside, the tripods were jerking and collapsing, their control signals scrambled by the cascade of feedback energy. By the time we reached a safe distance, the dome itself was splitting open like an eggshell. A shock wave of electromagnetic force rolled out, passing over us with a tingling rush but devastating everything alien in its path. All across the eastern seaboard, Keeper technology flickered and died. We had done it. By using the simplest element of our world, we had found their Achilles heel and turned their own gateway into a weapon. The network that had enslaved a planet for decades was crumbling. As I stood there, chest heaving, watching the dome collapse inward with a thunderous roar, I realized I was seeing more than destruction. I was witnessing the first true dawn this Earth had known in generations, a dawn born of water, desperation, and a secret hidden in plain sight. Have you ever wondered what it would actually feel like to stand in a world where your favorite science fiction nightmare is real? Where the posters on the classroom walls aren't about history lessons but survival drills? When I first saw those towering machines and the gray sky over Boston 217, that question stopped being hypothetical. It became a pulse in my chest. And it made me think about you, sitting right now in your room or on the bus or scrolling late at night. How would you react if you woke up in a parallel Earth like this one? Would you try to blend in quietly, hoping to survive? Or would you risk everything to fight back, knowing the odds were impossible? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I genuinely want to read your answers. This channel isn't just about me telling you what happened, it's about exploring the strange together, imagining how ordinary people like us might survive the extraordinary. Who knows, your idea or theory might even show up in the next video. So go ahead, tell me, fight, hide, or something else entirely. What would you do if War of the Worlds was no longer fiction? As I look back on everything that happened in that ruined parallel Boston, one thought still sends a chill down my spine. How close we came to losing not just one world, but two. What started as a simple observation mission became a fight for survival and a race to stop an invasion before it began. By finding the Keeper's weakness and unleashing the power of something as basic as water, we turned their gateway into a weapon and gave an entire planet a second chance. Yet even as their machines crumbled and their network collapsed, I knew the danger wasn't truly over. If one doorway existed between worlds, others could too, and somewhere in the dark, other threats might already be watching. That's why I created Chilling Secrets, to share the real stories, the hidden realities, and the lessons that could one day save us. If you've been fascinated by this journey into Earth 217, please like this video, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you won't miss what comes next. Your support helps bring these extraordinary stories to light. In our next episode, we'll uncover a place even stranger, a world where time itself runs backward, where history rewrites itself every dawn, and where one forgotten traveler holds the key to stopping reality from unraveling. Think Earth 217 was intense? Wait until you see what happens when cause and effect start playing in reverse.